Hi everyone, welcome to Teaching Committed. Today I would like to talk about lesson planning, as I promised. There are some key components of a good plan, and I have managed to find a good system that really helps you out whilst planning. So I suggest we just get straight to it. So I have a system of these individual notebooks. So I have a notebook for each student, and the all the lesson plans actually go into that notebook, so that I don't have to I don't have to look for each student in some one great big notebook dedicated to all the students. No, everybody has their own. So there are 5 columns in that notebook. The first column says date and prepared for class. So quite obviously there is no big surprise. We just state the date of the class and what we had as homework. So what should be prepared by the student. This is actually important because sometimes I just forget what I assigned as homework. So it's good to have that put down somewhere so that you just you can remember. Now straight to the more important components. The first one, lesson aim. So lesson aim is easily confused with the second one, which is lesson focus. But we'll just look at the difference between them right now. So lesson aim is what you want to achieve by the end of that class, or at least what you want to work on during that class. So for example, I have a student who I'm coaching for a unified state exam. So it's a national state exam in English here in Russia. And what the lesson aim might be. So for example, I have just my notebook in front of me, so I can consult it. And I see that we had a class just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the lesson aims was confident speaking. So confident speaking and confident comparison. Okay, I see that now. So that was the lesson aim. So what we were working on was just confident speaking. We were looking at some strategies of how to perform one of the tasks in the unified state exam. So that was our aim for that class, just to work on speaking. Then the same class was confident use of conditionals, differentiating between the first and the second conditional. So that's another example. Just yesterday, actually, we had a class, and one of the aims of that class was to expand vocabulary range. So we just worked with some vocabulary. Okay, now, so lesson aim is something that you want to achieve, or you want to work on. You want to expand vocabulary, you want to practice listening, you want to work out the strategies for doing some reading tasks, for example. So that is something that you should keep in mind whilst planning all the rest. This is like the key point, this is the first thing. Now, the second column is called lesson focus. So as I say, easily confused with lesson aim, but lesson focused is sort of not so vague, and lesson focus is just what language we are working on exactly. So for example, I mentioned working on confident speaking couple weeks ago, right? So for that class we had lesson aim confident speaking, confident comparison, and as lesson focus we had unified state exam, speaking section comparison. So that means we were just working with the task format. So we were just looking on a unified state exam. So we were sort of limited by the format. We were not just comparing, right? The same I've mentioned to you. Confident use of conditionals was the lesson aim on that day, one of the lesson aims for that day, and the lesson focus was conditionals 1 and 2. So this is just the language that we were studying, right? And let me give you one more example. So just yesterday we were working on speaking again. So that's a regular procedure, a regular activity. And yesterday, lesson focus for speaking was the monologue tasks. So they're quite, not quite, but just several of them in the Unified State exam. And you just have to be confident whilst talking on your own. You shouldn't feel embarrassed, you shouldn't feel uncomfortable. So we were just practicing that. And lesson focus number 1 was question asking, because there is task 2, if I'm not mistaken, in the Unified State exam in English. So it's a task where you're supposed to ask several questions on a topic that you are given. So for example, you are planning to attend a course, I don't know, an English course abroad, and you have to find out about the following. And there are just 2 types of questions that we can ask there. So those are just general questions and special questions. All of them have to be direct ones. So we just practiced forming questions, really. So lesson focus, question asking. Okay, so lesson aim, lesson focus. The next comes activities and anticipated problems. Activities and anticipated problems. This is also very important. So all of them are important. Spoiler alert. So I'm not sure that I have to clarify why I'm just writing down activities. So obviously I should have a clear picture of what we're actually going to be doing. So to have a lesson aim and lesson focus is not enough. You've got to have the procedure of the class, so what goes after what, and activities. So it's a good idea to also put the procedure there as well. So just procedure for every activity. For example, we are doing an exercise on listening. So the procedure for that would be studying the task carefully, then thinking of what you might hear, then actually listening to the task, and then choosing the correct option. So it's a very good it's a very good idea and an important moment to give your students the procedure for every task that they will be working with at the exam, in the exam. Sorry. So anticipated problems. This is something equally important. So we might forget about this sometimes when we just assume that the class will go smoothly and wonderfully well. Well, you have to take into account that not all classes always go well. Sometimes something just goes a tiny bit wrong, and you have to adjust the plan, or you just have to act on the spur of the moment, which is not really good. I mean, it's good if you're innovative and you can just come up with all different sorts of ideas on the spot, but it's better to have everything planned, to have a plan B for this kind of situations. So anticipated problems is just things like student doesn't like the activity, if you're teaching a kid, then the kid just doesn't like this type of activity, the kid is bored, which is something that quite often happens. So you just have to think about that. What else? It might be that the task that you're giving is a bit too difficult for this level, for this particular student, so you have to plan carefully and to keep in mind what you are going to do if the task proves a bit too challenging for the student. So we have so far lesson aim, lesson focus, lesson focus, activities and anticipated problems, and the fourth column is called notes after class. It's not necessarily, actually, not necessarily after class, but during class, after class, whenever you like. But it's good to put down everything that you just notice and you think is relevant or might come in handy later on. So, for example, we're doing a lot of reading task with the student, with one of my students, and I put all the words that she mispronounces in here so that I can sort of watch the progress, if any. And actually I do notice progress because the more we read, the better we get at it. So some mistakes that the student might make, and something that might come in handy later on. So maybe some materials that you thought of during the class and you think you might use them later on or something. So what else? You can grade the student if you wish so. So for example, this activity was performed in sort of B grade or C grade or A grade. So this was done really well. It's a good idea to keep track sort of how we are doing. So you might put all the information like this into this last column. So notes after class. Just for example, yesterday we did three speaking activities and graded them as B, B and C. So I remember that two of them were of the same kind and one of them was a different one. So there were different task types, and it's obvious that one of them was done just slightly worse than the other two. So I will look into how I could prepare the student better for performing for greater performance with this particular task. So I think that's all. It must be, because I think I've mentioned everything I wanted. Just give me a moment, just a second. So yeah, yeah, so I've mentioned everything. I will just mention it one more time for you. 4 columns: lesson aim, what we want to achieve; lesson focus, what language we're working with; activities, anticipated problems, all the activities, procedures for them, and problems that might arise; and notes after class. So everything that we think we need to remember, everything that is important for our further work. So that's it really, except there is this one page. It's actually the first page in every notebook, and it's called In Focus. So there are 4 skills that we have, so speaking, writing, listening and reading, and for all of them I have these stickers with some materials that are quite useful at this level for this student. So for example, for writing, I see that at this stage we're using EFC Expert, so I just take some cliches from there because they're needed for informal letters and formal letters, which are included as tasks in the Unified State exam in Russia. EFC Organizer, so a good book for just practicing some word formation. Let me give you, I guess, one more example. Speaking, what do we have here? So in terms of in terms of materials, there's this one website that I have here. It's a Russian website, so it's just a website about Unified State exam, and I take text from there. So we just use the text from that particular website, and I have it here because just in case I lose the link or something, I always have it put down somewhere, so that in case of anything unplanned happening. So that is lesson planning. I hope this has been helpful and interesting in some way. If you have any questions, please leave them. And if you have any comments, leave them as well. That will be interesting and nice to talk about this. Maybe you have some other ideas or some different systems of planning. That would be really interesting to study and to discover. So I guess that's all that I have for you. Enjoy your planning, plan carefully, take care of your students. This has been Teaching Committed. Have a good day. Goodbye.